Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube and you want to learn more about what we do here, visit officehours.global. Our first hour, we typically answer your questions around media and virtual events. Our second hour is something that we want to spend a little bit more time on. And since it's WWDC Day, that's what we'll be talking about, your expectations, what are your predictions, and we'll dive into that conversation. Now, panelists, to our producers, go ahead and enter your questions now. It's always a great time to enter them early, and we'll hop into it. Bill?
Thank you, Liberty. Good morning. Let's go right to our first one from Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana. And Jacob says, beside the Sound Devices MixPre 2 series, are there any other USB audio interface preamps with real-time noise reduction?
Alex?
The question is really that there's a lot of them with noise reduction. There's just not a lot of them that are as good with the noise reduction. So, there is some version of NR built into many interfaces, many mixers. The only ones that we found to be effective on a day-to-day basis is Noise Assist and the Cedar.
Guy?
Yeah, like Alex was saying, the MixPre series, and then you walk it up to the 833, 888, and the Scorpio, also from Sound Devices, and you can put those plugins. They cost money, so it's not just out of the box. The MixPre doesn't come with it, so you got to buy Noise Assist, or you can buy Cedar. Previously, this was an external box, so it was $3,200. So I think it's a bargain in the $300 and something range. But yeah, Andy Lipnick in After Hours was talking about a plugin. I don't remember the exact model that he uses on the Yamaha QL1. So there are some aftermarket ones, but I think that Cedar is the standard, and Sound Devices did a good job of making something very similar, and you could listen to some sound samples on their site.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Kind of like to add to the question and say, I like the idea of the noise assist in there. It seems like we're kind of indicating that the MixPre is a good one to use. Is there one that has XLR outs on it instead of that unbalanced 1/8" little plug?
And John?
Very well articulated by my fellow panelists. This Cedar makes a great box for $8,000. It's 8 inputs and got Dante built in it if you really want the high end.
And Bill?
And if you don't want to go that far, Cedar as a plugin does exist. One of the things, though, is if you try to run something really complex, and these algorithms for reducing noise out of a complex audio signal are pretty intensive. So hardware really does help. And in this case, there are plug-in environments. Like I use the Universal Audio Apollo Solo, which is one of their series of things that has a DSP inside the unit itself. So those things like real-time noise reduction can actually be moved off onto the hardware and gives you a little faster response sometimes. But yeah, you have to pay if you want to do the Cedar plugin with that, or something like Noise Assist. Just pick your direction.
Alex?
And we have used the plugin for the QO1, and or the what's built into the QO1 is not nearly as good as Cedar or Noise Assist. It does do some work, but not very well. so it's like not something we would use in production. To get XLR out, the MixPre 10 has XLR out, and the entire 8 series has XLR out. So those would be the ways that you would be able to apply it and get it into an XLR signal. And then, of course, the Cedar DNS2 is a stereo in and out, and it does stereo XLR in, stereo XLR out, and it does exactly what you want it to do, except that it's $3,200. But it will do the thing. I actually, after using both, I owned the DNS8 and a bunch of DNS2s, used them a lot, and at this point, I actually think that the Noise Assist is better than the Cedar. The Cedar, when you turn Noise Assist up, it's much more gentle in what it does. If you turn a Cedar up too high, you hear it. You hear the bits literally as you turn it up. So I would actually rather use Noise Assist than a Cedar at this point.
Next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware, comes up next. He says, great job with NAMM's coverage. That's what we did yesterday, the National Association of Music Merchants. What things have we learned from it that we can carry forward to the next event?
Yes, very good, team. It was wonderful to watch. Bill?
So many things, honestly, one of the great reasons for getting involved with office hours and some of the special things we do, there is so much to learn. My head exploded over the last 3 days, just watching, talking to, and being fortunate enough to be on comms and things like that on the back end. There are so many moving parts to doing coverage like we did yesterday. And, watching it is one thing, but you can't really tell how the team is working in the background to solve problems in real time, to keep the show going while things are happening around, whether that's positive or negative, whether that interview is ready or not ready. Being involved in a live show broadcast in this system that has been set up is one of the most fascinating things I've ever done. So I just highly encourage anybody who wants to learn some of the techniques of live production in this new era where everything's distributed online. Volunteer, come in and get on these crews, because I've never learned so much in such a short period of time in my entire career.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, we're doing work that could compete with anything that anybody is doing in regular broadcast TV, and then some. Some of the things I thought were very well done was the idea of the iPad with the Makana questions on it. It was just neat that the person being interviewed could actually see the question that was going to be asked, so they could prepare themselves to be spontaneous. Other things that I heard that would be improvements: a production assistant or somebody that would prep the next location and person that would be interviewed, lining up the location crew. And the other thing, and I just beg, please do it, is to use a wired microphone and not depend on wireless, because unless you're in a very specific frequency range, we found out the hard way that there's a lot of competition out there for signals.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think that we'll see what happens this weekend. I think that we might switch up the wireless a little bit. It's really hard to do wired in a space like that, because you have a lot of people walking around. I do think that a more traditional mic plug and electrosonics will probably be a little bit better, just based on past experience. I do think that it was interesting to watch, because again, as I said on the weekend, that it was a very different approach than I've taken in the past. And I'm starting to kind of think about, it's really caused me to think about that process. And I think that what I learned watching it was that I like these slower ones. I think we want to probably speed them up a little bit. I kind of feel like if we're going to spend a long time with someone, we can just bring them to the show so later. So, I think that one of the things that I learned is that I was a little impatient to want to go to the next thing, because it's just a big place with so many people. So I think that one of the things I'm hoping we do at Cinegear is kind of speed up the pace. Usually when I was doing it, I was aiming at 6 to 8 an hour. Like is pretty much what I was trying to hit when I was doing these at NAB and SIGGRAPH and a lot of other ones. And so I think that, but I think that it was hard because of the kind of the kit we built for that. That said, I thought that the kit we built created a great studio environment at each stage that I would have never approached. And I think we talked about that on the weekend. I would have never done that myself. And because I would have decided it was too heavy. So I think that actually we need to go heavier. So there's one kit that's rolling around that's like a little mini studio, but there's another one that's lighter that is bouncing from very fast. So when the big one moves between things, we jump to something else that is, spooling up and capturing 2 or 3 real quickly, and then we go back to the big one. So I think that a mixture of both, which again is something I learned because the team took a direction that I wouldn't have taken, and I think I learned a lot watching and what worked about that as well.
So with the pacing, is that more so that people would lose interest watching?
You just don't get to see everything.
Okay.
We didn't get to see lighting, because we've spent so much time doing these. The advantage of having everyone in one place is to show everyone kind of a smattering of those things. Now, one thing we can do is extend the number of hours that we cover it. So you start showing that. But I think that you want to mix it up. You might have a slow one and again, this is just stuff I was thinking about watching it yesterday and the day before and we were a little bit hobbled because we didn't have that second team to do that. But I think that having per hour, 1 15 or 20 minute hit, and then lots of little ones, and then one big one, and then lots of little ones, I think would let us see more breadth. And again, for depth, I kind of feel like we can do that here to some degree. So we want to take advantage of running into people there and I think there is something to do it there. But I think that we want to mix those up a little bit more. But overall, I think it was a huge success. The quality jump was dramatic between NAB and NAMM, and I think that we'll see some quality jumps in Cinegear, and then we have a little bit of time to kind of back up, and we'll do a more robust postmortem later. It won't be just this question.
And Mitchell?
I thought the cart was a big success, and you could tell that it was getting a lot of attention. And I think that Greg mentioned that he got a lot of respect from the booth people when he'd go up to a booth and he'd say, "Hey, would somebody like to come on camera and talk about this particular product?" And it seemed like they always got the CEO or the head guy because they came in. We came in with all guns blazing with all the right gear. So I think that was neat. And I think over the weekend, Alex mentioned that a good setup would be to have that cart, whatever it turns into, but also a studio or a booth where we could stage from, and also a area where we could bring people into the booth. If it's going to be an interview with the head of NAMM or some individual that would not normally be associated with a booth, we allowed a much, much more controlled environment for an important VIP type guest if you need that.
Bill?
Yeah, and I think this is all boots on the ground. I mean, we had some last-minute cancellations because of health issues for people. We would have hopefully had 2 crews out there. I think even 3 might be optimal, and the reason I say that is because it's the difference between EFP, that's electronic field production, where you have a single camera moving to get set up shots and achieve them, as opposed to studio 2-camera or 3-camera. Desi Arnaz famously invented for I Love Lucy that 3-camera, so you have angles to switch from, and if you extrapolate that out into a live show, to have 3 units so that you always have the one that's current, the one that's close to being current, and another one looking for shots. If you have the personnel, I would think that would be ideal for covering a show, but it's coming along fast regardless. We're learning so much.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and I think that is the power of it is, by doing a lot of these, we're going to learn. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to get into a thing, and as we improve the quality, we can go back to these organizations, say, this is how we covered it last year. This is how we're covering something else that's here. And as we clean that up to make sure that we're really happy with it, I think that the chances of us getting, nowadays, there's always booth space. It used to be everything was sold out all the time. And now I think, and for the next decade, it'll probably be that there's available space for us to put something. So it's really a matter of them giving us space to do things that we need to do, because I don't think that they're going to be at capacity ever again. And so I think that we provide a huge value to these organizations by covering their event and allowing their vendors to reach a global audience.
Yeah, and just pulling in some of the comments that are in the chat, Laura mentions that in order to speed it up, a more detailed run of show would be helpful. Mickey actually disagrees with the pacing. He said, I think we could do with much more or less panel chatter, which is this a second or third field team would fix. So just bringing some of that conversation in again. Oh, Alex has something to say.
All I can say is I agree with Mickey. I mean, I think that I would have it be 80% from the floor. We just needed another kit. I think that what the panel did really effectively was fill space between when the setup is going. So that's something that would have been very difficult otherwise. In fact, it probably would have been almost impossible to have people actually watch us do something. So I think that the panel chat really is just the glue and potentially adding some context to it. But I think that I would say 70-80% of it should be stuff from the field. Now we're all asking questions and so on and so forth, but the panel adds that little bit of extra glue. And I think that, we're going to find that solution over time by doing lots of it.
Next question.
Todd Davis in Hutchinson, Kansas is up next. Which decimator and or converter do I need, which is HDMI input, 3G SDI output, and force everything to 720p or 1080i for a PEG, and I believe that's public educational government channel. I got a Blackmagic Design microconverter, but that is only pass-through. I need to force resolution, he notes.
Guy?
Yeah, the Blackmagic up-down cross would be one, as well as the Decimator. It looks like Dennis is having a fun time finding that one. So yeah, the cheapest one will be this one, the $155 unit that will do the job. I mean, if you're just putting it in a rack, nobody's going to see it. It just doesn't matter that it's under $55. It's not like it's that much cleaner as far as getting the Decimator, but the MDHX is kind of the Swiss Army knife one that I would carry around with me in in my kit. I have two of them down here. One is being used to flip my teleprompter right now, and another one's doing some other kind of conversion. But yeah, you can also use the Teranex units if you do want something more elegant. But yeah, the Decimators and the Blackmagic, and then AJA also has some up-down cross converters.
All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Peter Moore down in Auckland, New Zealand. He says, this came up in my YouTube feed, and he's got a link there to a GPU audio system. He says they're using your GPU for digital audio processing. Surprised it hasn't been done before. Is this, in terms of products, one to watch? Thoughts?
Alex?
Yeah, NVIDIA has been kind of pushing this down the path for a while. It's kind of an obvious thing to do. It is surprising that it has taken so long to get to using GPUs for this. I think so. A lot of it's been CPU based, but the GPU makes a lot of sense. NVIDIA has a whole library, and they may be accessing this library. I haven't looked at it in enough detail to know whether it was whether it's using the GPU libraries that NVIDIA provides. So whether it works on AMD and NVIDIA or just NVIDIA. But if it's just working on NVIDIA, then it would be definitely something that was using those libraries that NVIDIA has created.
Next question.
Joaquin Mattis in Imperial Valley, California says, I'm slowly making the switch from Premiere over to Final Cut. What are the best resources to learn Final Cut and any ways to ease the transition?
Bill?
So, yes, there are ways to ease the transition. I will say that the first thing you really have to understand is if you spend a long time on Premiere or any non-Final Cut editing system, one of the first challenges is to kind of lose some of the muscle memory, or at least clear your mind as much as possible, because you're going to expect things to work a certain way. And largely they do in Final Cut, but it's just different enough that you will run into a lot of frustration if you don't really do some studying and understand what the differences are. The magnetic timeline functions different than regular timelines, but it kind of looks like a regular timeline. If you expect its behavior to be the same, you're going to get frustrated. So one way to lose frustration is to really study ahead of time. I think everybody who's been around Final Cut for a long time know that the guys at Ripple Training, Steve and Mark, do an extraordinary job. They've got lots of structured training. And if that is how you learn best, I highly recommend their products. They really have a wide variety. They're all first class. They're really well done, and they know the software excruciatingly well. They will get you farther faster than anything else. If you decide to take the option, which many people do, of just going on YouTube and watching things, it can be a little bit difficult because so many people have flooded those things with tutorials of all different ranges. Some of them are quite good. Some of them are terrible, and you waste a lot of time. And also, if you do that, what I call Swiss cheese training, which is I need to know how to do this function, so I'm going to look it up. Final Cut is a program that really benefits from learning the entire structure, from input and how the metadata flows into the program, through all your work in the storyline in the middle for the actual editing, to export on the back end. If you understand that whole flow rather than just look at details, it'll help.
Alex?
Ripple Training. Just download the Ripple Training. it's you know, like it's the one to use. Yeah.
Next question.
Joaquin Mattis, Imperial Valley, California. How often do you clear your Final Cut library? After working on a few projects with large file sizes, I realize that the library size fills up extremely fast.
Bill?
Do some studying on reference media versus importing the media to it. You don't necessarily have to fill up. You can use an external drive to hold all your media. Keep your projects on a fast SSD on your internal drive, and it should be fine. But you're right. Understanding the library is critical because that's how you move projects in and out.
And Alex?
I have to admit that I do something very dangerous pretty often, which is that I'll go through old projects and delete the render files directly from the package. It's not recommended, but if I need to clear space, it will just rebuild them if they're gone. And so I will go in and there'll be like 30 or 50 or 100 gigs of render files. Those things don't matter. It'll just rebuild them if it needs them. And so I have a tendency to go in. I think I told someone in engineering that, and they were very upset that I open up the package file and grab it. But it's the fastest way to clear the cache if it has it. And I don't import. I always keep my files set to reference so that I don't end up with them all in the package. Otherwise, the package gets really big. And always have an external drive for your library. Never put it on your internal drive ever. If it fills up, all your caches, your mail, the OS caches, everything else will be corrupted.
Okay. And how often do you do that? Are you clearing?
When I need to. Like
Okay.
sometimes sometimes it'll be in a week, and sometimes it'll be in a year. Just depends on how many projects I'm doing.
All right. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Has anyone had experience with Mixcloud Live for streaming music content?
Go ahead, Alex.
This is brand new, and production tends to move very slowly on these kinds of things because it's production. Like all kinds of bad things can happen. So I have a feeling that it's going to take a while before we see anybody using this in the wild.
Next question.
John Foltz, Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Since the Blackmagic Design Constellation has 24 video outputs, does that effectively eliminate the need for a 40 by 40 SmartHub in a smaller studio?
Go ahead, Alex.
You probably could do that. I wouldn't do it. Like I use routers all the time. Even for instance, office hours here runs through a Constellation, and it probably could do the whole thing with the switcher. There's still a 40 by 40 in there. And the reason for that is really that you also want separate protocols talking to it. You want to be able to do things that are stable. And so that by having another piece that's kind of managing that humdrum, it's not you're not making changes to the thing that you're running a show with. And so I don't recommend if there's any way that you can have a router, and I know that they make smaller routers, but eventually you just end up buying a 40 by 40. I mean, you can try to get a 20 by 20, but I fill it up. You'd be surprised. Once you understand what you can do with a router, you have a tendency to fill up. It's like a bag. You fill it up to the number of inputs and outputs that you have, because there's a lot of stuff. Now, what I do is I often pass things through it, so that then it'll pass a bunch of inputs in and then into the switcher. And then I have the switcher coming back to it. That way I can distribute stuff. For a very small studio, you probably start that way, but you will be limited until you put in a larger router.
And Tom.
I agree with Alex that in a very small studio, you might do that. But when you start multitasking, you start wanting to have a show through your ATEM, but at the same time, you want to be able to capture a stream from somewhere else or maybe two. Then you start seeing the power of this 40 by 40.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael again. Phish tours with 112 channels of Rupert Neve RMP-D8 mic preamps and a Yamaha PM10 console. Not being deeply familiar with Dante, how would they ensure proper clocking with redundant networks? And wouldn't Dante Controller crashing stop all the audio?
Mitchell?
I think most Dante devices can be the master clock, but you must have a master clock. And if it gets critical, I think that Dante makes a device that's specifically a clock that you can put on the network. And if the controller did crash and it didn't fall back to one of the other devices, it would stop all audio, but hopefully that's not the case.
And Alex.
Generally, in a system that you design, you can build it out so that the clocking is usually an external clock. You don't want to actually have any of the devices generating the clock if you don't have to, and so you'll have an external clock that both of them are referencing to make sure that works. If you have a pretty pre-built system and it's pretty tight and then there's not a lot of external components, you can probably get away with that. The one thing I will recommend is that if for any reason someone wants your stems or wants to be attached to those things, give it to them in analog. Don't ever try to mix Maddie or Dante over their own protocols in a field environment. So we've learned this the hard way. So you think that it's going to be easier to I can run one Ethernet cable over, or I can run one Maddie, but what you really should do is just run a stage box over. Have them pull the stems out, put them in there, and get rid of the clock. If you're doing it on a tour and it's your system, you can definitely make this work. But you should never let anybody have access to your network. It does crash, just in case you're wondering, and it can crash very badly and not just mess up your records or your outputs, but the entire show. And not that it's ever happened to me. So anyway, all right.
Next question.
Matt Halverson's up next, Brookings, South Dakota. He says, I heard a Cardinal's call the first time. He's got a link there to it. And it sounds like it could be a blaster sound effect for Alex's next Star Wars movies. What are your favorite Foley sounds?
Go ahead, Alex.
This isn't really a Foley sound. I actually really, I got an input one time, or I got a comment from Ben Burt that had me think about it a lot. And so when we were working on Star Wars, the Avid was crashed, which it did often. And and Ben was talking about where he likes to record gunshots, for Indiana Jones and so on and so forth. And he talked about the fact that there was a place in California that just had enough grass to go and just enough trees to go shh, and just enough rocks to go. And this is literally the one he said. And I said, well, where is that? He was like, I can't tell you that. And so he wouldn't tell me where it was, but it is but it really had me think about it. And as soon as he talked, and he said the big problem is people point the microphone at the gun rather than at the environment and listen to how it affects the environment. And when he did that, I can't stop listening to gunshots. Like every time I listen to watch a show and the gunshot goes off, I go, oh, they're pointing that towards the gun. Like, or they were doing this, and I can hear what it does. My second favorite one is I had to make one with no budget 30 years ago for a radio spot, and I used a trash bag as leaves, walking through leaves. And when I finished it, I was like, I wonder if I get a job doing this. If I had known that Foley artist existed at the time, I probably would have changed my entire career.
Right. We would not have office hours as exactly. We know it right now.
Well, I would know more about sound. Yeah.
We wouldn't be here. That's great. Right. The other thing with Foley sounds is mixing multiple sounds together to achieve your result. And Star Wars is an excellent example of that, where they were taking organic sounds like walruses and mixing it with this and that and pitching them up and down. It's just amazing what kind of crazy combinations that you can mix. And then there are the famous yells and screams that you see in Hollywood movies that get thrown in. I think it's sort of like an inside joke for Foley artists to throw a little James Brown scream in when the fire erupts and the car blows up.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia. When you're traveling, what's your go-to monitor as a second screen?
Guy?
Yeah, I use this one right here. It's the iPad Pro. I'm a Mac user, so it just is built into the OS, and I slide my mouse right over to the other screen. I've also been looking at some of these other ones because sometimes I do have to use a PC, and I'm looking at these $150 USB-C, the 15-inch on Amazon. There's also a 4K model. A lot of gamers use these with the Xboxes and whatnot. And Tucker was showing in our little Discord that we have a back end. What did he slap on the back? It was a yellow brick SDI adapter, so that when he gets on set, he can just pop in. If he's checking color, he can put on scopes and things like that. So those are pretty neat too.
I like the tablet idea. The only thing is like, but that would be the telestrator, using it from that perspective. But I'm going to check out that, what you said Tucker's using. Nigel.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Guy. I mean, I find if I go overnight for one night, then I just take my iPad, so there is no second screen. If I'm away for a couple more days, I take the MacBook Pro, and then use the iPad as the second screen. I actually find it quite hard to work in that environment in a hotel room or something, because the disk space is fairly limited, the network sucks, and it actually isn't necessarily very productive. But like Guy, that's the way I've done it. Although I am also looking at one of those 4K sort of 15-inch LCD panels, but they're about $350, and that just may be one thing too much.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I've begun to start working with my iPad. The two things that I carry are my laptop and my iPad, and real estate has become an issue because I got a 14-inch as I'm just going to use this as a little travel, which, by the way, I hate. I just haven't decided to buy a new one. It took me a little while. It'll grow in, and it'll never grow in. And so having a second little space is useful. I have to admit, I think that because of my dislike for my 14-inch laptop, I use my iPad a lot more than I used to. So it kind of pushed me towards the only thing I use my Mac for or my laptop when I'm doing is stuff that's very laptop-y. Zoom still likes to be laptop-y, right, on a laptop. But things that are very like Photoshop and other things like that, I still am using on things that I have to use on my laptop I use. But writing stuff, checking email, all those things are all on my iPad at this point. So it's a slightly different experience now.
And Bill?
The one I use most consistently is a Kagoda 13.3 inch. They're a little IPS flat panels. I like that slightly smaller size than the 16s. They're easier to mount. They seem to work really well with my 15-inch MacBook Pro. I have two of them on the two sides, and they're about $160 a piece. And the thing I like most about them is they have both USB-C and HDMI in directly on the monitor. So I've used those to good effect. But that and my iPad Pro always stays with me when I'm traveling.
Awesome. Thank you. And Nigel?
Yeah, two small codicils to that. Number one is, although it's very expensive, the Apple Magic Keyboard is an amazing device, and it really changes the way you use your iPad. And if you are setting up your iPad and your Mac, then don't forget Universal Controller. It's a great way to use one trackpad or one mouse and one keyboard to operate both machines.
Good call. Next question.
Next question comes to us from James Fosseline in Minneapolis, Minnesota. What is the correct place to download Downie, or is it another spelling?
Go ahead, Alex.
You want to search for Downie 4, and I just dropped it into Makana. It is software.charliemonroe.net/Downie. It's a very funny place to go find it. But that is the correct one. You will think it's wrong and that somehow it's some Where's site or something like that. But that's where it is. Maybe we should bring Charlie Monroe on sometime so that we can find out who this infamous Charlie Monroe is. Right. But I will say that Downie is a very powerful tool for downloading videos from almost anywhere on the web.
Nice. Next question.
Peter Moore back up from Auckland, New Zealand. For those who bought the original M1 Mac Mini, the 16 gigabyte RAM model, for audio people like me, does that Mac Mini cut it? Or do the various VST plugins and so forth really like more RAM? I guess I'll wait for the roadmap later this morning at WWDC.
I like what you did there, Peter. Mitchell?
The M1 Mac Mini, no matter what version you have, it surprises me. It surprises me all the time on what it can do. I've got a hyped up Power Mac behind me that my little M1 Mac Mini I paid $600 for a few years ago runs circles around it, and for audio no problem. A VST plugin or anything else that might chew up some resources, it's just going to be okay. In fact, it's a good way to use one as you upgrade to the next one up.
And Alex?
Yeah, I haven't seen. I've been mostly using Logic on the Mac Mini, and I haven't seen any issues at all. Like all I can, as Mitchell said, all I notice is how fast everything is and how it works. And so I haven't really had a lot of negative experience in that area. So I would say that it's working really well. I will say that it does top out in Resolve. So I was excited about it at first, and I drank some of the Blackmagic Kool-Aid. And I thought that, oh, this is great. And I started putting little files in. But when I started putting in 6 tracks of 5.7K, my poor little Mac Mini had enormous numbers of anomalies, including playback, but also rendering and things actually just breaking. So I would say that when I moved it over to the Studio, Studio Max, all those issues went away. So I do think that some of that might have been having to do with RAM swapping, that it was just running out of RAM to cover what it needed to do.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, how is the chip shortage affecting availability of Dante products lately?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, anything that uses a DAC is being redacted, so to speak. And it's certainly affecting Dante. Any of us that have bought some, I mean, I've got a pile of them over here, but I'm still waiting on some analog single channel versions so I can convert my Aphex channel to a Dante channel. It's a problem out there in the world of digital audio equipment. You're going to have to expect it.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so I'm waiting on my USB-C Dante adapter from everybody's favorite retailer, who's told me that it's going to be later in the year, probably near the end of the year. I can tell you that you can still get them retail, but you are paying 100% plus premium. So they're out there, and there are retailers. I actually saw one that when I dug into was in Eastern Europe somewhere, so you're not quite sure what you're getting. But if you want them at sort of recommended retail price, you're going to wait another 6 months. Otherwise, you're going to pay the bounty.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be quite a thing for quite some time. When I talk to manufacturers, they're talking in terms of years of this solving itself, not months, not It's like 18 to 24 months. Some have said some of their components are 36 months out. There's rumors that the Q01 will never be made again. It is they end of lifed it. And they're going to put out, because the new product line will come out before the old product, they can make any more of the old one. And so it's a crazy environment that we're in right now. So definitely take a look, and also take a look at eBay for respect. I mean, we've even gone to eBay, but the problem is, so is everybody else. so it's an incredible experience. But if you think that it's just happening randomly, no, it's across the board.
Next question.
Next one comes from Eduardo Augustine down in Panama. He says, planning on building a Flykit for portable streams. He streams sports, weddings, and funerals. Which audio mixer or audio handler would you recommend?
Go ahead, John.
I have a Flypack sitting right back here. It's got the X32 rack version. It's 3U. This is an 8U unit. It's got Shure Accent and the X32, all Dante built in. It's fantastic.
And Alex?
I'm a huge fan of the rack. The X32 rack, like what John is showing you there, that tends to be what I'll buy out of the gate for most things, just because the cost performance is just really, really high. You can keep all of your cabling in the case. So you only have an Ethernet out to some kind of X-Touch or something like that, and you can control it remotely. So you don't have to deal with all the audio cabling. If I don't do that on a Flykit, I will use the producer version of the X32, which will fit. It's a 19-inch wide. It'll actually fit into the in between the rack space. So you can put it on a sliding piece and pull it out. So the producer one from there on. I wouldn't use any of the larger X32s. And I do think that under, I would say $3,000 or $4,000, X32s own the market. Like, it's just that they just really are the best price per performance. You may want to decide to think about upgrading to a Midas version. You do have some slightly better preamps, some better subsystems. There's a great breakdown someone did on YouTube that really show you the difference between the Midas 32 and the X32. And it's not minor. Like, it's not like it's a little different or they just slapped on a new logo. The entire mixer is built differently. And I know that, I don't know about the X32, but I have successfully submerged a M32 mixer with sliders for a couple hours under 2 or 3 feet of water, and then recovered it. We never used it in production again, but it still worked. We got a lot of rain, filled up one of our cases. Anyway, the live view worked too. It was really kind of surprising. All right.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. Here on the panel, what is the best way to secure a Thunderbolt cable to a hub or device so that it doesn't fall out?
Mitchell?
Yeah, I get to answer my own question, which is always fun. But if you got a Thunderbolt cable like this, and you want to secure it to the front of like a hub, particularly if it's an OWC hub, you use this whole thing here called a Klingon with a C. And what it does is the cable slides in the front, and the sticky part on the back goes onto your device, and there's a little knurled screw here at the top that allows you to push it in, and then it basically gives it some support. The problem with these Thunderbolt cables is that they're long, and there's a lot of leverage that you can apply to it. So if the front is plugged in, you got all this space here to wiggle it all around, and it's always an issue when using Thunderbolt, that it can pop out or fall out or get pulled out.
And where did you get that from?
OWC.
Okay. And Bill?
There's also a class of tools for photographers from a company called Tether Tools. And the photographers run into this a lot, particularly if they're doing setups in the field, and they've got them for USB, for all sorts of other connectors. And they have a variety of solutions depending on the circumstance you're in. For example, they have one that I use a lot that plugs into an Ethernet port and then has a little tethering line that attaches to a different cable. So you can rig that with including accessories to put a loop, and since they can't pull this dumb connector out of the Ethernet port, that keeps the strain relief off of whatever connector that is active. So there's a lot of people who have worked on this process, and just take a look around. But Tether Tools is another good source.
And Alex?
I use a lot of gaff tape.
Keep it simple.
Sometimes you're on the field. You always notice that there's, with our laptops, we'll have a bunch of stuff plugged in if we're using the laptop in production, and you'll just see there's a gaff tape on both sides of your computer that just kind of keeps everything there and reminds you that it's there, and it's generally been pretty effective.
Yeah, until this question, I didn't realize that there was a tool to use it, because we just secure it down. But it's good to know. That's why office hours. Yeah, it's something new every day. But
for us, it's gaff on the computer, and then we have a little strain relief, and then it's gaff on the table, so it doesn't get pooled either. So so anyway, that's it. When laptops I don't do it as much anymore, because the big problem was the Mac Minis for a long time didn't have enough GPU power until the M1s. They couldn't run a Zoom or a Hangout without having some frame rate issues, and so we use laptops a lot for those because they had better GPUs.
Got it. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is back with the Zoom Q8n-4k that we talked about yesterday. Fascinates me with the 4 XLRs with the optional module. It's seductive. What hardware would make reframing the 150-degree 4K for field of view possible, or is this going to be a software switcher use?
Good question there. It looks like right now, the panel, we might need to bring this question back. Oh, and Alex.
Yeah, I would really have to see more footage from this. I think that it's the 150-degree field of view camera is a little gimmicky. I think they're trying to solve a problem, but as soon as I see really wide angles as my only option, I get pretty concerned about what I'm putting in there, just from a resolution perspective and distortion perspective.
And Mitchell?
Yeah, I think the comment about the camera audio was they could do without the shotgun mic, but the XLRs in the back are golden.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from our friend, Chris Haswick. Haswick is in Cape Town, South Africa. Just checking this week's schedule. Will the session at 7 p.m. Pacific time for the WWDC Special be recorded?
Great question. Alex?
Yeah, definitely. It's just going to be streamed to YouTube. In fact, it's going to go both to YouTube on the Office Hours site as well as YouTube on Renee Rich's site. So it'll be in 2 places that you can see it. So,
next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, is coming up next. When using foot pedals for slide switching in Keynote, I find myself wishing for some form of gesture control instead. Is that even possible currently, or do too many of us talk with our hands?
I'll
opt for that one, but go ahead, Alex.
I think I'd have a hard time with that. I think I do so many things with my hands. I think the gestures would be like, what do you mean? I don't understand. So I think that would be, I think I like the discrete buttons.
And then almost need to be like universal gesture controls so that, just so that you're able to not mix that up. Nigel?
Yeah, I actually did a set of interviews the other day for a role we're looking for, and I used Zoom on my iPad. And the number of times I raised my hand, it was really starting to annoy me, because I'm obviously fairly expressive and so I would do this and Zoom would go, oh, you've raised your hand. And then I get distracted by trying to lower my hand. So there's a point where you may find that is not a good investment.
Next question.
Chad Lafarge, Columbia, Missouri, says, what kind of hardened base would you use for our mobile studios, satellites, or whatever for future events? Weight, stability, mobility, all important considerations. Rolling rack, 80 by 20, 80-20, what would you use?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
That was a wonderful piece of gear that was kind of Bush fixed to make it work. Just watching it in action, I'm sure that the guys that had to deal with it could give us some really good feet on the ground feedback on it. But for me, it looked like it might have been a little bit top heavy. I think they had a camera fall at one point, but they need something that has a wider wheelbase and a place to put batteries. That would support that issue.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I'd probably, there's a lot of, the place you want to look, or one place to look is the sound kits. So there's lots of sound carts that you can, if you go to Film Tools, you can see a lot of these. And so a lot of stuff has been kind of built for that. And Film Tools has a great collection of carts that we could theoretically use even, very soon. Overall, I'd probably think about 80-20, like of just taking something and really designing it. There's a couple of design things you want to think about. One is, to some degree, weight. Like, how are you going to get it in and out of things? Larger wheels are going to be easier to get over things like cables and so on and so forth. So, thinking about having larger wheels on the bottom. The other thing I would think about is maximum depth. I would probably, with the wheels and everything else, make them the depth. If I put larger wheels on the outside of the rig as opposed to below it, because if you use really large wheels, you're going to want to do that. I would think about having the maximum depth probably be 20 inches, because you need to get through. You need to make sure that you can get no bigger than 28. 28 inches is the maximum that you want to go out from there. So 18 to 20 inches would probably be the maximum depth of it. I would make it 30 inches high. That's a standard. You could go a little higher to 36. That 30 inches, if you think about a folding table, it's that height. And then if you put, I've thought about this a lot watching everybody do it yesterday. Then I'd put recesses in, so where you could drop speed rail. Just drop it straight down the corners. So now you can just have it, there. Now the thing is that what I put in it is definitely UPSs. On the bottom, probably a couple of them, because they add a lot of weight as well as a lot of power, to the system. And then I would put a rack right down the center of it. I'd have some shelves on either side with the stuff that I needed. I'd probably make it about, 48 inches long. And so that's what I was thinking about while watching what you guys were doing yesterday, was like, what kind of kit would I do? Because now I'm sold on the idea that the kit is a cool thing. And I just have to now, I started thinking about like, what would it actually look like?
Go ahead, Bill.
Plus one on what Alex said. So the Soundies have been doing this for a long, long time, and they have all sorts of technology. Particularly, I've seen a lot of sound carts that have 12-volt batteries on the bottom, complicated power distribution, all the different connections they need. Also, in terms, he was talking about wheels. If you go on the Location Sound or other websites like that specify in these, a number of different tire configurations they have. I mean, those sound guys have to put heavy rigs across sand. They have rigs with bicycle tires that really can go up and down steps easily, and they have all sorts of different casters and things like that for different uses, and sometimes those can be swapped out depending on where you're going in. So yeah, they've spent a lot of time working on this, and I would use the considered expertise of all those generations of sound guys.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it depends on if you're local. I mean, what they built was pretty cool if you're able to just throw it in your truck and take it locally. When I was looking at going to NAB and doing the same type of thing, I had mocked this one up out of Triad Orbit gear, and I know that it doesn't look super beefy, but these casters are super heavy. So they have some kind of patented design. I've seen them throw big monitors, cameras. So right now I have this is just a Sony X70, but you can see that's a dual ball head, and there's actually two. You could mount a second camera here, and then I did like they had the iPad, and then I was going to use a tray, which let me cut back to me. So the tray is another piece that you can add on that looks like that. So it's got the mount on the bottom, but then it's got a lip. So if you do want to angle, things don't fall off, kind of like a music stand. And then all these holes are actually mounting points. They're all, threaded. And then you can put these rubber bands so that if you are going over bumps and things like that, you actually secure hard drives. I had a power battery bank on here, so I could put that a little bit lower. And Triad Orbit's the name of the brand to take a look at.
I like that you said just the weighted part, like how stable that it would be. So it's like, oh, that makes it look very modular. Mitchell?
So since we're kicking around ideas and we have the time to do it, let's go big. How about a golf cart with a jib arm on it? That would be kind of cool. And it needs to be portable so that you don't have to ship the golf cart, so that you can find one pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, probably need to find out if you're able to have that in the location. But like you said, throwing out ideas. And Alex?
Yeah, one thing to look at, I think that could be really cool. I was just kind of doing some research while we were talking, is the Film Tools Steadicam Junior Cart. because it already is kind of built on at least one side to have a pin, that can go up and down. It's heavy. It's got 2 shelves and it's collapsible. So that would be the one advantage over what I was talking about, is having a lot of these carts, you can set them down on top of each other. So there'd be a little bit of a build that went on before you got into it. But that would be possibly another option, is something that you can kind of break down and build back up again.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Joseph Mueller in Guelph, Ontario, Canada.
Guelph.
What is your... Oh, Guelph. Sorry about that.
Guelph, yeah.
Guelph. Interesting. Never run across that. Thank you very much, Liberty. What's your favorite utility knife?
John?
I was favored. I was not favored, but I was fortunate to beat out all of my siblings and get my dad's original Leatherman from the 80s. And this thing's really heavy. It's a nice piece of gear.
Alex?
Tried a lot of them. Gerbers and lots of other, specialized ones, but I tend to come back to the Leatherman. so the Leatherman, the one that I probably use the most, I just don't have it right in front of me, but I usually have one on my keychain that's like the little Leatherman that is like the little keychain version, which works really well unless you're on a flight in Zimbabwe, and then you have to try to figure out what to do with it. And you just persuade the guy to hold on to it until you come back. so anyway, but the larger one is something I have and I use the skeletal one. So it's not this traditional Leatherman, it's a skeletal because I can hang it and it's a little bit lighter. So that's a different one. And then the coolest one that you get the most comments for as a utility, it's not a knife, fortunately, is the Leatherman Tread. The Leatherman Tread is a bracelet that has screwdrivers and all kinds of other things in it. And when I'm in production, you'll often see me with a tread on, and it saves me so often. Like, I just use it all the time, and you get a lot of comments, people, and sometimes it's hard to get through TSA, but they do let you through. It is approved, but they definitely look at it for a little while.
And Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree. Leatherman is +1 on that, but my problem is that I use them all the time, and I've got them in my little secret pockets, in my jackets, in my pants, in my luggage, and I can't tell you how many I've lost to the TSA. Because they're very suspicious of any metallic tool type thing, and particularly if it has a knife on it. You lose a lot.
Yeah, I kept downsizing. I used to have full-size Leatherman, so I'm using a Wave now, and it does 99% of what I want. So that's my tool of choice.
Next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida says, I'm looking to purchase Linsoul in-ear earphones. Which model should I choose?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yes, I have the KZZAX ones. They're about $68 without the microphone, but I can't tell you why I have that one, because there are hundreds to pick from, and I think I just gave up and found something around the price point I wanted.
Next question.
Peter Moore. Go ahead.
I forgot to raise my hand. I just wanted to I was trying to find the actual link. I have the Linsoul KZZS10 Pros, and these are right now they're only $39.99. I don't even know how they're so inexpensive today, because they're definitely less than the last time I was here. So they're $40. That's what I'm wearing right now, and like Nigel, I just didn't know what to get. There's so many of them. What I will tell you is I have tested buying the more expensive Linsouls. These are like $140 or something like that. I don't like them. So like I after testing them, they hurt my ears, and I thought that I would get used to it. So the less expensive ones I find to be actually preferable over the more expensive ones, which is a very remarkable thing. I thought if they're great at $30, what are they at $130? Turns out not better. So
next question.
Next question comes from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. Oh, I'm sorry. No, Michael Smith in Silverado, California. I have any of the panelists used CalDigit TS4 Thunderbolt 4 18-in-1 hub? And if so, thoughts?
Has anyone used that? The CalDigit hub? Bill, you have.
I've used CalDigit's hubs. I've used the OWC hubs that we love. I get a little nervous when they add so many ports, because often it's fine and there's plenty of power to run everything. But I have seen circumstances where I've added too many for example, USB devices with too much draw, and suddenly things slow down a good little bit. And so every time they put something else, especially the complex ports like USB-C that could have power delivery and have to have a large bandwidth, I sometimes worry about the little chip in there getting overrun with things like that. So I'm cautious about, all that matters is how many different ports that I can get. I hate to be in a situation where you add one more device and everything else slows down a little bit. Just my own little particular way of thinking about it.
Copy that. And Peter's question is back up.
Thank you. Good. So Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. Recently, guys showed a Zoom hardware package with a custom Mimo interface and so forth for $25,000. That's US. Number one, is that available for sale in Australia or New Zealand? And number two, thoughts about putting two in a shipping container with a wall in between for two, quote, rooms to ship to live events.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the overseas thing, because the first one we ever sold went to Iceland and we hadn't even built it yet. So we just put it up on the website and it sold, and we're like, where's it going? Iceland. So yeah, we put it on a pallet and shipped it off overseas. We have two in New Zealand already. So I'm not sure exactly where they're at, but if you ping me in Discord, I could probably get you the address if you want to see one in person. But yeah, basically it's a one button studio where you push a button. And the branding we're using is Studio-matic. It's like a ode to the Jetsons. But basically, college kids were wanting to make videos, and they were having to go through this process of learning cameras and lighting and audio and what buttons to push, and sometimes having to go through week-long programs just to get certified to be able to check out gear. So we made this system that just makes it so they just walk into a room, push one button, and it starts recording. But nowadays, you can also add on Zoom and a Telestrator. Those are two add-on options, which will allow you to come into a Zoom session like this and then Telestrate over the top or do cool compositing with Mimo Live. And that's one of the nice things about the all-in-one solution is that you can put whatever background you want. You can put the university's branding. A lot of these are winding up in libraries where kids can check them out and use them. So, but yeah, we'd be happy to ship one to New Zealand. So hit me in Discord if you're interested.
Nice. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, many venues have transitioned to touchless and cashless services. He's noting food ordering, payment from a mobile device, for example. Would that be managed via a custom app or Apple Pay integrated into the point of sale system?
Nigel?
So the answer is yes, it probably could be either, but in a really large venue, it's a point-of-sale system, and the Apple Pay is a side app, or it's just like a credit card payment transaction on the side. Because what you really care here about is the stock control and the management of inventory and all the stuff that works with the point-of-sale system. Great example of that would be there's a very famous restaurant in Vegas with wine angels that go up a very tall, 30-foot wine tower at the Mandalay Bay. And the owner once explained to me the benefit of that, the point-of-sale action, which is an iPad at your table, is that when you select your wine, you only select a wine that they know they have in stock. And when the moment you press the button, someone goes and gets it, and it comes to your table much faster, which might mean you buy another one.
And Alex?
Yeah, the point of sales, smaller things are using things like Square, as well as, and Apple is trying to kind of move into that business as well. But Square is really the one that owns a lot of that business when you go to a smaller venue. For larger venues, Nigel's absolutely right. And I have to say, I can't show you pictures, but I have gotten to sit in a venue on in their control room. They have a huge control room, and it's this wall to wall. I mean, like literally 40 feet wide and I don't know, 20 feet high of monitors that are all the data. It's actually not monitors, it's a big LED wall. And it shows you all the data. Now that has security data, it has other data, but it has the sales data in real time with graphs, with process. Like as you buy your Coca-Cola, because all of the things are in the venue are now owned by the venue. It used to be that they were individual, whatever. They have individual brands, but they're all run by the venue. And so the venue sees everything in real time. They see when they see spikes for, when there's a halftime, timeout, small breaks. You can see the spikes in real time of people going out and buying it. They get to see what the effectiveness is of different locations. It's profound. Like to see how much data they have in real time visually in front of them that they're sitting there at every game, looking at.
So this has actually worked out for some people in the end.
Oh yeah. It's quite a thing.
Next question.
Chris Widener wants to loop back to the Linsoul earbuds and says, Linsoul with mic. Anyone tested the mic quality specifically?
There was a show last week. I don't remember which one it was, but there were a couple people who had mentioned, I don't know, is Tony Mobley have the Linsouls with the mic, Alex?
I keep on meaning to test it, and maybe we can test it in after hours because this one has a mic on it. It's behind me, but it has a mic. So I'll try to maybe in after hours call in and we'll see what we think of it compared to a variety of different things. I did get this one with a mic as an experiment, and I haven't gotten around to the experiment. I will say that what's interesting is the one that I gave a link to, or the one that or maybe I didn't give a link, but I'll put a link into it. That's $40. Is $40 with the mic or without the mic. So I don't feel like I'm going to get a great mic, but I'm going to get a usable mic out of it. Like if you needed it, like I don't expect it to be great. But it's nice I thought it would be nice to have it. The one reason you wouldn't get it is any concern that you have over a TRRS input. So in some sound tools, that wouldn't be there. So I have a mixture of both of them. Before I mentioned that Linsoul was $40, which is the lowest price I've ever seen on the ones that I'm using right now, I bought some. So I have a mixture of mics and no mics before I mentioned it because I was afraid it'll sell out because it's I couldn't believe that they were $40.
Right, at that price point.
Yeah.
Grab it while it's hot. Mitchell?
Mickey, by the way, points out that Linsoul is the name of the store and the KZ is the name of the device. It's a KZ.
Awesome. Thank you, Mitchell. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back up again with what video playout tools have been most used at large concerts and or non-corporate events? Could you use a Playout B or Mimo Live for those use cases?
I dare to say yes, it's possible. I personally don't know what some of those playouts that they've used for playing out at a larger conference wise, but Alex probably does.
Yeah, there's a lot of for those larger venues. There are a lot of different tools that people use. I mean, you'd be surprised at how often Playback Pro is still used. They have old computers they haven't updated for corporate stuff. What we bring in is actually EBSs. The thing is that the size of the show is so big that there's no reason for me to try to figure it out. I just want something that's going to play it out when the incremental cost is not high enough to make it worth buying something or getting something less. Disguise will of course play it back. Arena, play stuff out. And so those are other ones that we see pretty often backstage.
And Guy?
Yeah, I see a lot of Key Pros, AJ Key Pros, or popular item HyperDecks. And then if they are using a system that can trigger upon auto roll is what they call it. So when you actually cut to that deck, it'll begin playback. QLab is another piece of software, MIDI, and then Softron has some expensive software as well that will allow you to play out. But Playout B, I love that because you can put it on a Pi, and then through a web browser, you can upload a clip locally. And then, so anybody on the network can upload that clip, and then it'll pop up in the HyperDeck, and you can play it out. So yeah, Playout B absolutely can be used.
Oh, nice. Alex?
Yeah, and for the higher end stuff that we do, we definitely use Softron. And the reason for that is we have a 10-bit, you can get 10-bit 422 output from Softron, as well as many Dante channels as we care to put onto the signal. So Softron supports that directly. And I think our record is 37 channels of audio going out at one time.
Okay. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. I'm currently working through the Code with Chris program to learn iOS development. He's got the link there. And I've been struggling with ideas for a portfolio app. What could be a strategy to find an idea and a designer for UI help?
Alex?
Yeah, we actually have someone from AudioKit on this tonight on the show. I would take a look at that, and I would, because you're interested in audio as it is, you may be interested in building some kind of little audio app. And AudioKit makes a lot of that much, much easier. So I would take a look at what they're doing there. They've got a lot of support as well.
Next question.
And our final one in this group, I think, from Douglas Carmichael again. He says, some have mentioned that the push to cashless public spaces would unfairly exclude those with disabilities, for example, those on the autism spectrum. Wouldn't a contactless card or lockable mobile device be easier for those populations?
Alex?
Interestingly enough, I haven't heard that argument. I've mostly heard arguments around the fact that it would exclude people who don't have accounts, that are financially challenged and not have accounts, because I can't imagine cash being easier for for someone with disability than a contactless system. But usually the accessibility that I've heard anyway has been mostly around people who for a variety of reasons can't get some kind of bank account.
All right, we have wrapped our first hour. Thank you so much, producers, for all of your great questions. And now we'll move into our conversation about WWDC and our predictions, your predictions, and just talking through that. And for those of you who are not familiar, WWDC is Apple's developers conference that they do each year. So that's where they're rolling out, possibly telling us about software updates and previewing some new hardware. I know that I have seen some stuff around AR that I'm kind of geeked about, but let's jump into this conversation. Alex Goldner.
Hello, thanks for letting me in halfway through the show for the second hour. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I do have a little wish list. I try and with my WWDC wish list is do stuff related to operating systems and development, and less so about stuff that happens to be announced at the same time, which is the show that's happening in, I think, 2 hours. That's just stuff they're announcing just for the summer, I suppose. But so I'm interested in things like a full modern replacement for Apple QuickTime Player 7 Pro. In other words, that app which I still have running because I haven't moved on even to Catalina or Big Sur or anything. I'm still happily in the one before that, whatever it happens to be, because I like using the old QuickTime Player Pro because I like the UI and stuff like that. So I'd like that. But
I see John had his thumbs up, like agreeing with you.
I know. I mean, I should really be patronizing one of the many great third-party players, but it's the kind of thing I wish that Apple would still demo what AV Foundation can do, the kind of media types it can play, or if it could be connected also with all the stuff that the VLC can do, because that's all, what can VLC do? How come QuickTime Player or Media Player, whatever they want to call it, can do that? But more on the education side, because Apple like to promote the nature of Swift, their programming language. They have a thing called Swift Playgrounds, which is really cool. It allows you to have the code on one side and then the UI and actually the result on the other of what you do in Swift. And I think it would be really good to have what's called a Swift Playground for creating FX plugins. In other words, imagine if you could make it so, hey, we've got a new version of iMovie. It can take video editing plugins. And if you want to get a quick result using a very limited bound, which is what you can do on a video screen every frame update or for a transition, that's actually got a nice bit of a constraint. So you go, okay, I can't have menus and I can't have all this other kind of stuff that app has, but I can create a very small piece of code and learn how to use Swift with code that has to be very fast and renders really well just for video and different aspect ratios, different color values, all that kind of stuff. I think would be quite cool. I do have a longer list, but maybe I should yield the floor to a few other people.
One more. Give this will be your top three.
There's not a lot of, for the producers. If you want us to talk faster or jump quicker, then you need to ask questions or give us suggestions of what you want. Otherwise, we're going to take our time. Go ahead.
Right.
And what I would really like is that we have 2 beta programs from Apple, effectively 2 big beta programs. There's their OS beta programs for things like the iPhone and for the Mac. I would, of course, being a video editor, would love a Final Cut Pro beta program to go along with the Safari beta program. Because Safari, to some extent, has to fit in with standards. It has to fit in with HTML5 and the future of standards, the future of what, how we render stuff and how we create apps online. And Safari is very important for that because especially on the iPhone. I think that if Apple starts to think in terms of leading the video standards and to say the future of video is our clouds of media plus metadata about how to put them together, then if you start thinking in terms of Final Cut Pro as a video standard and an editing system and a way of bundling stuff together and actually not exactly open source that, but make it possible so that there's a kind of way of making it so that people can be prepared for future versions of the future of video, which means having a beta program and warning people, be careful. Beta software can wipe your hard drive, but if you've got a spare drive or a spare computer and you want to live at the very bleeding edge of video technology, it would be fantastic if Final Cut Pro had a beta program.
That would be interesting. Nigel, what's on your list?
So I think this is a very interesting WWDC for Apple. And if I was in the corporate communications team, I would be minorly panicked, because I think the problem's going to be that, and I'll give you a 100% bet on the fact we have new operating systems today. And I'll give you a 75% bet on the fact that most of the mainstream media is going to go, huh? And not really understand anything in them and say it's completely unexciting. So if you're corporate communications, you've got to think of what is the Hail Mary pass you're going to play? What is the thematic or idea that you want to inject in this thing that makes everybody go, wow, that was interesting, that was new? Because I don't think it's going to be hardware. The only hardware I would guess we might see would be a low-end M2 laptop, either an Air or a Pro or something. And I doubt you'll see any more than that. I could be wrong. So I'm really looking for what is the thing they want to do to make us go, wow, this is exciting, because it's not clear to me yet, unless it's AR or VR, what that's going to be. I also have two things on my wish list that I know they're not going to do. The first is I would like to dual boot my iPad into macOS and iOS. I think it's about time that my iPad can do both of those. And I would like them to clean up the interface, or at least modernize the interface on Apple TV. It feels so old and so stodgy that I just don't think they care about it. And I think there's 1,000 things you could do to make that platform much more interesting.
It's interesting that you say something about like the corporate communications and just how the media might receive it, because for the first time, I've never seen this before, and anyone can respond to this, that Apple, I saw ads for WWDC DC on LinkedIn, and I've never seen, apart from, pushing people to watch the live. And I personally just question that, because it's Apple, and Apple, beside, like, them doing advertising is, from that perspective, is rare. So I just thought that was interesting, and it makes me think, okay, what are they announcing that they are trying to drive people to watch? So it'll be interesting to see what you're saying with just the corporate communications and media and how they receive that. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, they have widened the marketing, which has me believe that they might have something to show.
Yeah,
they might have something that they're interested in showing. If the marketing has been much heavier and much wider for this than I've ever seen DubDub. DubDub's always been like, well, this is for the developers. We'll show you a couple new things. But there is something going on, because they're definitely putting a lot more. I've seen a lot more WWDC imagery. I do wish, by the way, people gave me comments I didn't realize about how did you do the cover that we're using for the evening session. The evening session has all of us looking to the side in our Memoji, and I thought that there was a kind of fun. A couple people on Twitter were like, "How did you do this? Like, how did you do this image?" And the answer is we took the phone. We look to the side, and you kind of have to get your thumb right over where it needs to go. You look to the side and you take a picture. That's it. And then everybody sent me one, and I added it. So I got, everybody's pictures to the side there. And so
How'd you send out the instructions? Was it just like, did you actually?
I literally was texting people like, okay. Hey, can you take me? Of course, the ones that were, almost everybody did it really quickly. It was just like, oh yeah, I understand how to do that. And I didn't actually, I was trying to do some kind of weird screen capture. And of course, Renee was like, oh, this is how you do this with an alpha channel. And Justine didn't explain it to me. She just sent it to me. Like literally it was like a quarter second back, and it was like, here it is, okay. So she obviously knew how to do that. And so, so they did it the fastest. Renee showed me how to do it. And then I sent the instructions out to everybody else. So, so anyway, so that was it. The only thing that I added between that, by the way, as a Easter egg there, is that I put a square, or actually an oval black between each person, and then blurred it, and then lowered its opacity to about 15%. And that's a really subtle thing. And if I turn it on and off, you'd notice it, but you won't notice it otherwise. And what that did is added the effect of ambient occlusion between the people, as if they were sitting next to each other. So I just wanted just a little bit of like a very subtle contact shadow between them, which sells the shot. If I turn it, I should turn it on at some point in time in after hours. I'll turn it on and off. But by turning it on, I was like, there's something wrong with this image, and I can't figure out what it is. I kept on thinking through it, and I finally realized that it was just missing that little shadow.
Like just that need for the spacing between.
There's just a black. You would be a little darker where you were sitting next to someone. So that's. So anyway, so that was the only thing that I added there. Anyway, so to get back to the I do think we're going to have more Memoji stuff, because it seems like at WWDC is when we see all the new Memoji features.
Right.
And what I was going to say is that I really wish that they would give us the 3D models or have some way to export that out, because it was really hard to do this with 2D. It would have been really nice. Obviously, Apple has the 3D models because all their PR has all these incredible images, and just being able to relight them, I think would be really cool. Even if they're not going to give us the 3D models, which I understand why you wouldn't, it'd be really cool to be able to relight my models. I think we will see more APIs for Memojis. I know this is it's a funny thing, but Apple's sneaking up on Memojis because they make a huge difference in AR. So there's this law, and what we're seeing is, I mean, I will say that what we want to keep watching in WWDC is we'll see if it works. So there's two different ways of doing things. There's throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks, and most of it doesn't. And that's what Google does a lot in there, and what they're doing. Like, here's a bunch of new features, and then and here are all the features we got rid of last year. Apple has a tendency not to do that. They have a tendency to work on things for very, very long curves. And what we're seeing is this slow rollout to AR, which started a long time ago, 2015, 2016, where we started seeing USDZ. And it's this, as they're working on all the hardware, which has been hard, they're giving us all the tools in Motion and Final Cut. They're giving us surround audio inside of Logic. They're giving us all these tools, and you have Reality Creator, Reality Converter. You have, all these bits and pieces that are slowly being added that help you build the ecosystem. And that's the problem that we've had in the past, is that, what the struggle for Facebook is, you can create great goggles, but if no one can make any content for them, it's really hard. And so I think that one of the interesting things Apple's doing is slowly building this entire ecosystem that's capable of building the content for their AR output, which I would say there's a 20% chance that Apple will release a developer's version of a headset this year, but I think it's more likely to be next year. I think that sometime this year, there's a 50-50 chance that they'll release USDZ to the Office apps. And I think and the reason they should do that beforehand, before they move it public, is because it's going to create a huge demand for 3D models in USDZ that look good, that are all built for the format. And so I think that, I'm always, every one of these events now, I just watch for that. Because that means once they release the Office apps with USDZ, I believe we're within a year of seeing the headset. And now suddenly everybody's got demand. And part of it has been, how do you get the 3D companies need to make better USDZ exports. The only way to really export well for USDZ right now is out of Adobe Substance. And even then, it's a little wonky. You basically export textures, and it happens to pop out one file that you need. You throw everything else away. It's like, I don't know. It's like a crazy, mining for USDZ. Companies supporting that more. I think other things I'm looking for are, do we see Unity on the stage? Apple has not really spent a lot of time with Unreal since the Epic lawsuit. Epic used to be on stage talking about AR, talking about 3D, but ever since that fallout, we haven't seen Unity on stage, but we haven't seen Unreal either. At some point, somebody's got to show up. Because it's part of their thing. Or has Apple decided that they're going to go it alone and try to develop all those tools on their own, which I think would be very difficult. So I think a lot of us are watching, because it'll really be hard for Unreal has got a lot going for it. Unity has done a lot of great investments as well. So it'll be really interesting to see, what happens there. I think we'll see some hardware. I think we'll see a laptop, maybe some Mac Minis with M2s. I think that if they're going to do the M2s, they might as well put out the Mac Minis as well. We saw a rumor from B&H website that said that Mac Mini towers we're another. I don't know how you separate Mac Mini towers from Studio, because the Studio is a Mac Mini tower. But but anyway, we'll see what that actually means. So I think that those are some interesting things. I don't think we're going to see the update to QuickTime. I think that I think Telestream took on Switch, and I think that Apple would be. I don't think QuickTime is important enough to Apple for them to undermine a partner who invested a lot in a tool that basically replaces QuickTime 7. That's what Switch does at a price, at the price that it, that it does. But it does almost everything that QuickTime 7 does. I think maybe all of it and more in some places, maybe a little less. You don't have quite the same track control that you had with QuickTime 7. But I think that Apple it's not a good, Apple would really need to control that for them to take it back, because it would really hurt Telestream for them to do that. And so anyway, so I think that those are the kind of things that I would look at. Again, as Alex said, I'm really looking forward to Swift Playgrounds, more Swift Playgrounds. It's a pretty exciting endeavor that they're going down the path. And then in general, we just want to watch for upgrades to Swift. Swift is still very young. so it's not a complete system. So, and that will be some of what we're covering at 10 o'clock. But the next step is some of us will be trying to watch the State of the Union, which is happening in the afternoon. And that's where you really dig into what's new.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Very well said, Alex. So first of all, Mr. Gollner, the update to QuickTime 7 is called VLC. It runs great. Fantastic. and we're hearing rumors about Reality OS, which would be, like Alex said, kind of their API. I'm hope that's my wish list, is some sort of opening of the kimono for filling in the holes for Reality OS, which all those pieces of the puzzle will fit into. And then with that, which is part of NERFs, which are neural radiance fields, which is kind of this new technology for visualizing 2D imagery in a 3D world, which is really amazing. Hopefully they talk a little bit about that. And that's part of Reality OS. The departure from the nomenclature of a GPU to these neural engines that they're putting in the M1 chip. So the thought of a GPU, I think, is going to start to fade away as a platform and move into these reality engines. That's what Silicon Graphics used to call them. And using these neural engines to produce a Reality OS or reality engine in computing moving forward, I think could be quite interesting. And then, in addition, Mac Pros. I want to see the new Mac Pros with the M engine, which won't be available to the end of the year or first quarter next year. And then, like Alex said, the gaffe about B&H producing a Mac Mini. If we had a Mac Mini that had 4 Thunderbolt ports on it that would drive 4 6K monitors, that would fit very nicely beneath the studio lineup. Right. And so I'm excited. We'll see.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I let it slip that I was in the market to replace my 8-year-old Mac Pro with a new one. I'm sure Apple's going to respond by releasing some kind of information, like John just said, about
now that Mitchell has let from now that the secret agency has inadvertently dropped code into the system.
Yeah, it's like it's been so long, and they're feeling so bad for me. So I've been, as a loyal customer, I expect to be rewarded with at least news. And I should be quiet because the machine is right behind me, and you know how that is when they can hear that their impending replacement is coming. Let's see, hardware stuff. Yeah, I think so. I think there's going to be some hardware announcements. I think people are so excited about the Apple Silicon that they're going to want to hear how do we go from N1 Ultra? Where do we go next? Obviously to an M2. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm not much of a programmer, so I'll leave that to the programming guys. But the opening statements that they make about hardware, looking forward to it.
Yes, me too. And go ahead, Tom.
Well, I love getting the sneak preview to the new OSs. I don't particularly jump into the betas, however, so a lot of that won't be reality until fall. I have been waiting to upgrade a Mac Mini until the M2 and didn't expect that to drop until fall. However, a site that I send a lot of money to all the time did leak that, so I think there's a pretty strong chance.
And Alex Gollner.
Yes, if you can bear it. Following on what from Alex said, I like the idea of Apple combining, keeping in touch with what your status is. In other words, using Memoji to show how interruptible you are. So you know that feeling when you're going down a corridor in your office and you look into somebody's office, or you even turn to look at your friend who's visible from where you're sitting, and you can tell from their body posture, from how interruptible they are. Or do they look like they want to talk about work? work, or do they want to talk about what happened at the weekend or what will happen at the weekend? And imagine if Memoji were able to show that 3D model of you would actually show, oh no, they look like they're really intensely paying attention to what they're doing, or they're just leaning back on their chair and they look like they would welcome to hear the latest joke or to have that water cooler moment. So I like the idea of Memoji being used for that. And combined with that recent thing, I can't remember what they called it from last year or the year before from Apple, where you choose what status you're in on your phone and your Mac. What's that called? Where one of them is driving, because there's one also already built in called driving, where that's that kind of how interruptible you are. But certainly in the case of Memoji, I was just thinking in Final Cut Pro, we have a voiceover window. Imagine if we had a faceover window using Memoji, and essentially you could just import your little window in the corner, your commentary, but it was actually using the Memoji 3D model of you. And of course, then you'd have access to that in terms of motion, in terms of animating it and messing about with it. So in other words, it would record you, and then you'd have lots of behaviors attached to a 3D model of you in USDZ, and then you'd be able to mess about with it in motion.
Focus mode. That's it. Thank you, Dennis. Focus mode is what you're looking for, of just like not interrupting you while speaking. Alex?
I was just going to say the same thing that the other Alex said. I was like, it would be really great to take the tools. And I think that what you could do is actually use your phone, connect it to your Mac, and open up Motion and just sit there and talk and do it. And I think you'd end up with a whole new set of content. Like literally, it would be an entirely new genre of content if you could have, and if it was stayed in 3D inside of Motion, then it, so that you could, animate around it and so on and so forth. I think that it would be pretty exciting.
And Alex, come back.
You could snap your fingers and animate a 3D hat on your head, or change your face, or change yourself into a different animal or something like that to tell a story.
I'd just be happy with facial animations. I would just be happy to be able to, just think of all the things you could do with a talking shark.
Don't let my daughter get a handle of that.
But think about it. But think about teachers. But think about teachers being able to do something like that, and especially if you incorporated it into Keynote as well. You could be building these little things that were the characters and everything else, and it would be explosive. Like being able to not have it just be on your phone, have it to move forward and be able to do that, I think would really take Memojis to an entire level. And while Alex was talking, I was really thinking about all of that, and I was like, oh, that would be explosive. And the thing, and again, Mitchell mentioned that he's not a coder, but the thing we want to look at is, what is this providing developers? Because that gives us a vision of 6 months, 12 months down the road, what we might be able to do as artists when the developers do what they do.
Yeah, that's a good call, especially just Apple just being for creators, like people being able to create, whether you can code or not. So yeah, it would be cool to see what comes down the pipeline there. All righty. Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, if that's okay. I think the news and what the PCI card story is in the Mac Pro will be a thing that will mean a lot. If they say, oh yes, we support NVIDIA cards, and here's somebody from NVIDIA on stage talking about how excited they are about the new Mac Pro, that would completely blow people's minds when it comes to the NVIDIA walled garden and, a piece in our time. And hopefully it wouldn't be Chamberlain holding a piece of GPU paper, or something like that. That would be fantastic. In the case of the M1, M2, I wish Apple had gone with the Intel way of talking about numbers as features. So M1 was like the equivalent of the Intel 3 chip, and then a 5 chip and a 7 chip. So the idea would be, what would have in the coming year would just be the 2022 version of the M1, and next year would be the 2023 version of the M1. And then all the M1 would be just all the features associated with everything from an iMac down, and then the M2 or the M3 would be from the Mac Pro up, if you see what I mean. But I don't think they've gone that way. But they haven't actually explained what an M2 is relative to an M1, but it looks like it's just going to be the next year's, which I think is a pity. And whether it's a totally different thing, which I don't know to the extent it would help for marketing and PR, like a separate thing that maybe the journalists would understand, would be at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference, let's announce the Apple Worldwide Consultants Conference. So what happens is, imagine if you got all those people who you consult to about how to have Apple solutions. Right. There's an event for them made of sessions in exactly the same way, stuff on chat on Slack, where if you want to do stuff with, say, databases and FileMaker, or you want to do stuff to do with Keynote, and it's a whole thing. Come to us in October, and we'll just have all these sessions, but it'll be from consultants, and we're going to have 150,000 Mac consultants attending virtually, and after that they'll have the rest of the year. They'll be able to be so much better at delivering solutions for people in businesses of all sizes. That'd be really cool.
That would be very good call. All right, Bill, let's dive into these questions.
And we do have a bunch of them. The first one from Douglas Carmichael. He says, what would you think of Apple partnering with Code with Chris to offer their curriculum in the OS? From my experience so far, their curriculum is a lot more to the point than Playgrounds.
Go ahead, Alex.
I think Apple's too committed to their process to partner with someone specifically. So, but I do agree with you that Code with Chris is better than what the Swift Playgrounds training is. It's just the training is a little, I don't know. I don't have a good word for it. it's just like that that will describe it. It's a little slow, and Code with Chris is much more to the point.
Next question.
Comes from Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. Any Apple TV expectations, TV OS, or surprise announcements with respect to the Apple TV hardware?
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I think there could be a surprise Apple TV built into the studio monitor announcement. Just before the back-to-school dorms don't really need a live TV anymore, with streaming being the primary media consumed.
I like that. Nigel.
They've talked about Apple TV being a hobby at Apple, and it does have all the hallmarks of the hobby. And a good example of that is the increasingly stupid naming around Apple TV, Apple TV Plus, and Apple TV Plus, and all the other Apple TV Pluses that now are, you don't know whether you're in the app or the tool. And I think at some point they've got to decide, and they may have decided, and they may just not be ready for it. They have to decide what they want this thing to be. And, there is quite a nice feature in the Apple TV Plus app, or the TV app that isn't Apple TV Plus, where it tracks all the thing you're watching and shows you the next in the series that you're going to do. All of that needs to be rethought. I don't think the hardware needs much more power. They'll put more processors in it. They'll upgrade it until it does something really astonishingly different like VR or AR. I think that it's probably powerful enough, but I think they should decide what they want this thing to be when it grows up.
Alex?
That's what I was actually going to say. Certainly the naming thing is, it'd be nice if they found a way out of that morass that is the naming. But from what Nigel just said, it would be amazing if the tvOS / all Apple OSs gave you a personal record of what you're watching and how far you've watched, even if it's on an app that's running on a smart TV separately. But instead of Apple owning that information, if they were generous enough to make it so that tools or third parties could have access to what people watch, but only so that the user themselves has it, but not the actual app themselves, that would be a bit of the kind of Apple privacy thing in terms of saying, this is really useful to have this information for yourself, but we're going to make sure that even the developer of the app that does something useful with it doesn't know anything about you.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think Nigel is onto something, because I use my Apple TV more and more with all the other services I've got, all the Plus services from other people, and it's becoming more of an aggregator of these services. And as the lines begin to thin between the fact that there's a Paramount Plus there and a Disney Plus and Netflix and all those other ones, maybe it just needs to be Apple, and Apple provides the way to search through all of this content via Apple, and it connects you up with them accordingly. So if Apple makes it simpler to get more content from different services, I would find it a useful device rather than going to a specific Netflix or a Fire Stick or a Roku. Apple should bring it all together. So I think they're onto something there, Nigel.
Alex?
Yeah, one of the things I would really appreciate from Apple, which I don't think is going to happen, is they now have a sync tool for wireless speakers. So if you have a wireless speaker, you can literally open up your phone and it will figure out the sync between your audio and the video. They don't have it for wired speakers. So if you go HDMI out into something, it won't make the correction, and everything in my system for some reason is a frame or two off. And it just makes me crazy. And so I don't want to add another piece of hardware to it to make that work. And so I think that is one thing that would be really interesting. Also, the Apple TV is capable of 120 frames per second 4K HDR. Like, it's built into the hardware. It is in the 2.1 spec, and they haven't turned it on. And what they did do is release a whole like 80 million phones that can shoot footage for that. So I feel like the shoe that may drop this at WWDC or in this fall would be supporting having the Apple TV be able to be the one place that, now you say, well, what about the TV? Well, all the TVs do 120. So all the TVs already do 120. Any newer TV will have the 2.1 spec that can accept 120, but they all have the capability of playing it. Now that may not seem like a lot, but what we found in 120 tests that I've done is that it's not great for film. It actually makes you feel a little sick, because there's somewhere between, there's somewhere in the mid 90s, 90 frames a second, that your brain just starts looking at something and thinks it's a window. And so you can get disoriented when, if you have a large enough screen, you'll get disoriented if you see it at 120 frames a second, because 24 is constantly telling you not real, not real, not real, not real, not real. That's what 24 does. So it allows your brain to just watch something. 120 says real. Now I'm not talking about the goofy motion blur that's added to our stuff that's 24 or 30. That's why it looks weird. The reason it looks bad is because it's softened, because it's just making up frames. Like it's literally just making up 6 frames between every frame or whatever. So that doesn't make any sense. But I think that if people start shooting 120 with their phone and they start playing it back, I can tell you that the effect as someone who works with 120 a fair bit is that it looks 24 frames a second starts to look really framey. Like you just notice all the frames because you're not used to seeing them anymore. And it starts to ruin your experience of 24. Like it just really, you just start going, oof, why can't we have more frames? So I think that, especially on larger screens. And so I think that Apple is going to flip 120 on this year. I don't know exactly when that's going to be. And they already have the generation, the tools to do it. Interestingly enough, almost every major camera released right now can do 120 as well. So there's a lot of things that have been happening in the background that get us closer and closer to starting to do 120 acquisition. And I think that the Apple TV turning on 120 could suddenly light a pretty explosive switch to start moving toward that. And by the way, it's exceptional for live. Like the baseball that Apple's doing, 4K 120 will be a different experience. Like you will not be able to go back to TV. Like if Apple, and it's interesting that Apple started testing this, early on, but if they turn it on and then they say, oh, by the way, all the baseball is 120 frames a second, 4K, it'll leave broadcast in the dust.
Okay. Alex?
When it comes to Apple TV, the most fastest and the most powerful connection on an Apple device is on the Apple TV 4K, which is the HDMI 2.1. It's faster than Thunderbolt 4. I wish it'd be nice if they actually came down and said, what are we doing about Thunderbolt 4 actually not being fast enough than HDMI 2.1? It would be nice if they sorted that out. But maybe if they also make the Apple TV into a separate, more business-based device to some extent, or the basis of a business system in terms of saying this is your Zoom platform, your separate Zoom platform, your conference system, or in terms of working with separate cameras that you could have in your home, or better even than one inside their Mac Studio display, Apple Studio display, little cameras so that effectively you can get for conferencing, but also for business, but also for the home. But separately from all that, the Apple TV could also be a preview system for video collaboration, connected to a service in the cloud in which you're actually in sync with somebody's timeline somewhere else in the world. And you send somebody something in a box and you say, look, this box, plug it into your TV. And now let's have a live communication about this edit or this collaboration that we're doing in Keynote or something like that. So I think it'd be interesting if they'll probably only do that if they could combine it with a service in terms of collaboration service to do with the Office apps, but maybe with the Pro apps as well. So it'd be nice if they said, look, we're really doubling down on tvOS, and we want you to build apps like this, like what we're doing, but don't be scared by what we're doing because we're going to make the OS powerful enough for you to be able to do some really cool, the kind of thing effectively that Cisco would have done 5 years ago if it actually if they'd had this level of, they could afford to do video conferencing or collaboration at this level.
Yeah. And Alex?
Yeah, I think that one last note on the 120 is it would be helpful if you had a content distribution system sitting on top of it that you owned, like Apple TV Plus. So anyway, so it's easier to move people forward and create a lot of market pressure in a way that they didn't have even a year ago.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next again. If we do see an M1 Pro or an M2 Mac Mini, what niche will it fill versus the Mac Studio?
Good one. Mitchell.
Well, I think the M2 will just simply replace the M1 Mac Mini. The Mac Mini sort of as a grab bag that's been hugely successful for Apple. If you're a very purpose-built kind of person and you need a bespoke system for what you do, the Mac Studio will probably handle anything, including video editing for the most part. But if you need that ultimate capability and maybe some tweaking in terms of having PCI cards, I think that the new Mac Pro is where you want to go, because if I just did video editing, that Mac Studio would be fine. But because I need to do Cinema 4D and things like that, I think this new so-called Mac Pro that may come out today, or at least be announced today, is the way to go, because that's where you want to go. So the M2 Mac, just another way to improve or add value to what they already have out there.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, some subtle changes to the Mac Mini would fill a gap that sits between. The Mac Mini sits at $1,000. The Studio starts at about $3,000, really. I mean, $2,500. There's a $1,500 version of this that's 64 megs of RAM, got 4 Thunderbolts on the back, and that's it. Like, it may not have all the stuff that the Studio has. It may not have the ProRes chips or the H264 chips, but it kind of fills that gap. Apple over time tends to want to fill these up so that there's not a spacer between the devices. So a beefier Mac Mini, I think, makes a lot of sense. The Mac Mini Tower I found to be fascinating as a rumor because again, the Studio is a Mac Mini Tower. so I don't quite understand that one. But a more beefy Mac Mini with M2 64 megs of RAM, or megs, you can tell how old I am, 64 gigs of RAM and 4 Thunderbolts at $1,500. I own 7 Mac Minis personally, and the company 090 owns another 10. And I would start buying more if something filled that gap. They would definitely be useful for me.
Next question.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. Will there be a one more thing? And if so, what does the panel think it may be?
It would not be Apple if there was not a one more thing. Go ahead, Alex.
I think that they moved away a lot from the one more things. I haven't seen one more thing in a long time. You keep on thinking we've been conditioned because Steve Jobs did it to have one more thing, but it really feels like they've slowly, if they do it, it would be the headset. If they took it down one more thing, I think it would be a headset. But that would be the only thing that I think that they would do that for. But they've done a couple things over the years. They've gotten rid of the Apple is doing great, thing that I think that they felt like they had to do after they had a near-death experience. So all the financials they got rid of, and they've been much more to the point. Which I've enjoyed. So it'll be interesting to see.
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't think it's necessarily the one more thing, but I do think that we haven't talked about medical and or the watch, and I do think they're continuing to research in that. There's so much possibility. I mean, when they put the green light laser pulse oximeter stuff on there, there's just so much more distance they can go there, and they're obviously now hooked well enough into the medical world and have their regulation thing under control that I'm going to consistently look for. I don't know if that's big enough, but I think it could, in the long range, have a big impact if they can do more heart rate monitoring, things like that, for people who want to monitor their health in real time.
Next question.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. I'm interested to hear Nigel's thoughts on what Apple might do with HomeKit and the Thread, given I love all the stuff and use Homebridge I/O to integrate my Elgato key lights into HomeKit.
Nigel?
Yeah, so what we're going to see is each of the manufacturers, the main ones, Apple and Google and Amazon, can keep putting out products to try and steal market share from each other or keep trying to build up a fortress that they can work from. I think reality is at some point that is going to really struggle, and the lack of interconnectivity is going to become difficult. So you're going to find organizations like the Connected Standards Alliance going to come up, and they've got a new standard called Matter, which was meant to launch in the middle of the year, but probably now won't launch till the end of the next year, maybe even CES. I think that next year would be a better time. And so I think you're going to see a lot of people still trying to take territory, still trying to build fences, and a lack of interconnectivity. And at some point that has to break down because this stuff just doesn't work together well.
Alex?
I really think Apple needs to build its own home tools. I just think that they've tried to do this thing where they provide a platform and a format for their for the different companies, and all the different companies, for the most part, are trying to figure out how they wedge it into their overall SKU approach. And it is, so that Apple isn't seen as a big market. Apple would get a lot more attention if they started going after the market that all these other folks say, here's a platform, but we're going to start building stuff, and it would definitely speed people up, because I know as a user, I've tried to buy lots of this HomeKit stuff, and it's just been a disaster. I think HomeKit for me has been a disaster. Everything I buy just doesn't work the way I expect it to. I've given up. I won't buy anything. I'm just waiting for Apple to release things, because I just think that the entire program has been an unmitigated disaster.
Go ahead, John.
The gentleman from Texas hit my point. Matter was supposed to be a big deal this year, and they pushed it off. But one thing that's pretty hidden is Google bought a hardware gateway. This has got to be 5-7 years ago now. There was a gateway out there that talked 4 or 5 of the predominant protocols back then. Google bought it and killed the project, it tells you a little bit about their positioning.
And Alex?
I think it would be amazing if Apple TV was the basis of a new Apple home computer or Apple Home. And then they actually say, look, we're making this into an operating system that is open in Matter-based. And they actually try to say, gather around the home computer, or at least have the computer somewhere. I mean, obviously, I would think of it as HAL and have the voice of Mr. Douglas Rain or something like that. But the idea of having a separate home computer, and it's a computer that's an more ambient computing way of looking at things. But let Apple think in terms of their fully remarketing this to everyone, in terms of people all over the world.
And Alex?
I love the idea of having the Apple TV form the center, or that monitor that we're looking at form the center of understanding everything about your house would be a really great thing. I do think that Apple just has to stop trying to work with other people's formats and platforms, and how do we connect to this and how do we connect to that. It's not very Apple-y, and they don't do it very well, and they haven't done it very well. And the hardware manufacturers are obtuse, and I think that it's just, that to try to make this stuff work. And I just think that they just have to go their own way and give up on something that hasn't worked. And as someone who is passionate about wanting to add automation to my to my house, and just so frustrated by the experience.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, if Apple makes a significant push to extend and promote HomeKit, could we see it impacting residential systems integration businesses over the long term?
Alex?
Again, I think they got to move past HomeKit and just move into home tools that they build themselves.
Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, up next. So what do we think about the possibility of Apple using AirPods Pro Plus and Apple Watch for 3-point motion tracking for AR, VR possibility, or sci-fi stuff?
Go ahead, Alex.
You possibly could use it for some of those things. You'd be surprised at how a lot of those aren't precise enough. I think that's the big problem, is the accelerometers tend not to be as precise as they need to be to really give you would see a lot of bouncing around. What has worked already that they've already done some areas for is using the camera. So the camera and the LiDAR are actually much better if you put them out in front of you, and Apple already has APIs for that.
John?
So 8 years ago, we did Wi-Fi trilateration, and we were down to about 3 feet of accuracy within a warehouse. We were doing some testing for Lowe's at the time. But AirPod Pros, to tell me what aisle to walk in the grocery store or Lowe's, would be a great application. And
Alex?
I certainly like the idea of maybe one other item that is relatively somewhere above a tag, but below a more complicated device, but maybe just needs a couple of things to make it work, which would be like the AR thimble or rings in terms of positioning and control. So I could have my hand on the side of, just down to my side, and I could be doing this sort of thing, controlling something. And as I walk along, I can do this for control. And as regards for AR, I like the idea of making it so, sadly, being a more portly fellow, I like the idea of going into a shop and only having certain items of clothing light up to say, don't bother trying these ones on, but these ones, You can try these on. And they're all lit up in front of me.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next with Alex. You mentioned the push for 120 frames per second. For office hours, wouldn't Zoom's maximum of 30 frames per second be the bottleneck to us adopting it?
Go ahead, Alex.
We would definitely do it as we send it out to the stream. So us talking might be at 30 frames a second. I don't know if you need more than 30 frames a second to do that. People sitting around talking, and then you could have play out on the far end of our system that is 120 HDR. That's how we're planning to do some of the other stuff, surround, all of those things. And I think that I've really thought about it a fair bit, and I think that 120/30 is a pretty solid, because as we increase that, we increase the bandwidth load that'd be required for each person to participate, and that would be problematic.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand said, code snippets have shown that Apple is re-entering the Wi-Fi router market again. Any thoughts?
Go ahead, Alex.
And maybe certainly code snippets to do with networking and Wi-Fi, but not necessarily for routers. It could be as local cloud server devices, in terms of, because Blackmagic have a little cloud pod, you can plug an SSD into it, and that becomes a device for a little work group, but also it's synced to their cloud. And I think Apple will like the idea of people using video on cloud, and maybe future versions of editing software that have lots of video on cloud and dealing with proxies, and having that automatically sync with the cloud to your local SSD and device. So that essentially you'd send somebody SSD with 80% of all the video you're going to be working with, and then you plug it into the pod, and then 2 or 3 people in your location will be able to connect to it. And then as new footage is captured, you will get proxies via Wi-Fi and eventually downloaded fully to that drive. So maybe it's a little bit more to do with work groups and Wi-Fi and pods and drives and stuff like that. That would be quite cool.
Go ahead, John.
I hope you're right, Peter. For someone that comes out of the network world, the airport, when it came out, was way, way ahead of its time. And their remote modules that you plugged into the wall, they were super far ahead. And the manageability of the airports, I have 4 still in my house running Wi-Fi AC that I'm looking to replace with probably Ubiquity, unless Apple comes out with something new with 6E.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, dropping out was, I think, a big mistake. They said it means that they can't control their ecosystem. So I think that it would make a lot of sense, again, as an Apple user that used their Wi-Fi tools for years very successfully. I was frustrated when they left it. I've been kind of awash since then, trying to figure out what to do next, and everything's okay. But I would vastly prefer to go back to having it. And I think that as they move forward, they have to.
And Bill?
That whole mess with Qualcomm and cellular, I know, is adjacent. I mean, it's really wireless connectivity in all its forms. And I've got to believe that since that Qualcomm mess happened, everybody has been talking that Apple is working in some skunk work somewhere to try to redefine all that and bring it in-house. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they did some communication module that took care of Wi-Fi and wireless and everything else all in one integrated service. We'll see.
And back to you, Alex.
And if you can bear for me to weigh in on this one as well, I think in the idea of imagine the Apple TV is actually going to be a Wi-Fi router, because it won't be the Apple TV anymore. It'll be the Apple Home system. So to make up the fact that you can get a Roku for $40, well, what do you get for $150 or $200? You create the Home Hub in terms of your home system, which includes Wi-Fi service, including repeaters and stuff like that.
Next question.
From Liberty White. Did anyone test the AR Easter egg on the home page? And then she notes a link to it.
Yeah, I put a link there. I didn't have enough time and I was trying to do it while on here, but I've heard a lot of people saying that on the event homepage, that if you take your mobile device and face the emojis in the hero, that it will then off to the side, you'll be able to see some cards, and there are about 8 of them. So maybe Alex has tried it.
I can't get it to work.
Right. I couldn't get it either.
It's I don't know how. I'm on an iPhone on Safari. I have gone to the web page and I can't get it to do anything. So I don't know if it's I don't know if you have to download the Apple developer page. Maybe John knows.
Yeah, from what I saw, No one said anything about downloading. The only thing they said was try downloading the image, but that didn't make sense to me. Maybe John, you have some more. Did it work for you, John?
No, I did. I didn't. I'm going to go check this out right now. But I did hear that they were going to have AR trading cards coming out for the show.
that's what. Yeah, these are the trading cards. You can collect about 8 of them. Which, again, this is like going deep into that AR realm to tease that out as a part of their marketing to begin with. So I was just curious, and any of the producers, if you have, let me know, please. Next question.
Alex Forty-Goldner in London here at the panel. B&H's site mentioned a special WWDC Mac. What do you think that means?
Alex?
It's strange. I think maybe placeholders for things they're guessing may be coming is actually what's really going on with B&H. But I was thinking, well, maybe this is a new DTK, Developer Toolkit Mac that actually has some hardware that's actually completely different for Macs, and it could be for some other strange device. It could be, an Apple Home System, or it could be for AR or VR or something like that. But essentially what you're doing is you get a Mac with special hardware in it, maybe it has to work with very low power, has some of the constraints, strangely enough, that you'd actually have to have if you're going to do AR or mixed reality stuff, because you actually have to have all the constraints in there. And then once you have those constraints, then you can develop away. And, if it runs on that, it'll run on any future devices. So I'm just interested by that possibility.
Next question.
Alex Forty-Goldner, what might Apple announce about Apple stores and retail?
Alex.
Because the funny thing is, we were talking about the fact that Apple don't have to talk about how they're not beleaguered anymore, because usually the WWDC things are like, so let's go to retail and talk about how many shops we've opened and stores we've opened. And it's just like, oh, really? Do we have to sit through this for the next 2.5 minutes of a precious 2 hours? But now, to think of it in a more positive sort of way, it would be really nice if Apple came up with, firstly, with Apple stores, to work out what they're doing about community, how easy it is going to be to open them in different countries, how to really make them spread. Because what this really comes down to is Apple's trust of people outside Apple. Because Apple stores partially came out the fact that Apple didn't trust anybody, didn't trust the big box stores, didn't trust the local dealers. But with this right to repair, and maybe with a little bit more trust and a bit more systems, and combining with Apple's services, it would be really good if Apple started talking about making it possible for me to go to my bank manager and say, okay, here's my business proposal. I want to set up something that's almost like an Apple store, because I can do all this. I have all these people who are trained up to be staff. I can provide these services, but maybe customize it for my local businesses or certain vertical markets. And if Apple could really expand out the word of consultancy and stores, so that you can go to countries like in Italy, there are 15 Apple stores. There's so few for a huge, G5 country, right? Or countries all over the world. If retail matters, or what retail actually will be in terms of community building and the places where people can go and get supported in education. So they could actually turn that around and make that so the journalists go, what is an operating system? But they go, oh yeah, okay, Apple are doing stuff to do with retail and helping lots of people create their own businesses and whatever it happens to be. So I hope something they'll talk about that.
Okay. Alex.
Tom's got the cards up, it looks like.
Tom, can you tell us what you're doing?
Yeah, I was gonna come to him after we finish.
Okay, we'll go. Yeah. I think he's holding it up, so let's go ahead and let him interrupt.
Yeah, I am.
Thank you, Tom. So this is so everyone can see the cards that we're referring to.
Here we go.
So how did you do that?
How did you get there?
Talk us through.
I went out to the Apple site using Safari here on my iPhone, and I was able to get the cards to come up, and now I can click on one.
What did you click on?
Yeah, so you're showing us through, so you've got a camera there, you are on...
That's your phone signal,
But I guess the question is what did you click on the site,
right,
on that page?
It actually just came up very small in the lower right hand.
Can you back out and do it again so we kind of walk us through?
All of us are like, how did you do this?
I don't know that I can ever get it back. But here you go.
Okay.
And that's just from the page, that front page?
Yeah.
It says WWDC 22 on the upper corner.
Right.
Maybe they just gave us the wrong, I don't.
But that's the signal coming from your phone, because it's in 3D Z space floating above your computer. So it's your phone connected to...
So I can come in by just bringing the phone closer to it.
Yeah, it looks cool. I think what we're all curious about is how you actually got it to work.
I wish I knew. Let's see.
Yeah. Can you go back? Are you able to go out of that page to go back to the web page?
All right. So I came to this page on Safari.
I'm on a different
at apple.com.
page. Oh, you're on apple.com.
Okay.
Hold on, not developer.
You've got to go to apple.com and events, and then you tap on the event, and it gives you this
there they are.
There you go. And you get the AR object.
Oh, so you had to start at
There it is.
apple.com.
Uh-huh.
So that was the...
And then as you come in,
Let's see here.
then you can start
I
playing
just
with it.
placed them somewhere. I can't find it. It definitely set it down somewhere, but now I can't. Oh, tap to add object. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Hold on.
Okay, so we've got a live lab going on here as everybody's.
No, there.
trying
I
to-
see him. I see him now.
Okay, so
Okay. In theory,
It's
you
a
could-
little like, I'm like, okay, well, it's cards. Like, I don't understand. Like, in my opinion, they should have put the people up there. Like not the card, but the people should have stuck out a little bit. The cards are okay. It's kind of, I think this is very much of an NFT drop type thing. Like it's not an NFT, but feels like an NFT drop thing or something. So it's okay.
Can you save them?
I don't know.
Well, you can save.
Wouldn't
the
that be the
object.
point if you're
I think
collecting?
I heard I was listening to a
But
review.
the key is you have to go to apple.com. Don't go to the link that was in the article. Go to apple.com. That's
Dennis
and then
got it.
Yeah, it all works when you go to apple.com, not when you go to.
So I think you could make this using Reality Composer. So if you like the look of this and you want to say to a client, hey, do you want me to make one of those? And they'll go, yes, please.
Yeah.
Then they'll pay you to learn how to do it because you actually have a job to do this. It's like,
but to go back to the to go back to the what happens in retail, I think Apple could do a lot with AR that they haven't done yet. That they could turn the stores into an exploratory area where you connect it to things. Like, for instance, I happen to know a lot about Angkor Wat, or I know some about Angkor Wat, and I've studied it a lot. There's a huge IMAX / California Sciences thing that's happening in LA. It'd be really cool if the stores were tied into that. And if you went in and you'd open it up and you'd be able to see, some of the ruins, and you'd be able to see history, and you just see them on tables. You can just walk around and look around and get people excited about what they could, activations like that could be really interesting. And then, oh, by the way, that 3D model or whatever is available, and you can download it and play with it on your own. Developers could play with that as well. I mean, those things would get, I think, developers really excited, and also people. I think the only problem is you just end up with even more people at an Apple store that are wandering around with their phone like this all the time, trying to figure out what was going on.
Marketing wise, that would be so much fun.
Yeah.
Bill?
Well, I just wanted to say the other thing that I've always been impressed with seriously about the Apple stores is that Apple understood that as much work as they put into making their products as approachable as humanly possible, they are high-tech devices. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been into an Apple store and they've been holding a set of pretty rudimentary classes and watched people who are not natively technologically friendly. Let me just put it that way. In all age groups, from little kids to older folks, who they are helping to get value out of these products, and that all the effort they put into those human interface guidelines to make it as simple as possible to use, there's still a lot of people who just don't make a lot of those leaps. So I think that their stores, if nothing else, do an astonishing job of helping people find comfort with even the basic uses of their things that the software and hardware teams have put so much effort in there. And I just applaud them for that. It's great when one of us, people who show up on the panel who live and breathe technology and really understand how everything works, goes in, and we're going, this is a little too simple for me. But there are a lot of people for whom it is very important for them to take advantage of these amazing new tools that we have in the world.
And John.
Here's what I want to buy from Apple. It's called the IM. I gotta take it now. Let's see. And it's everything built into my bathroom mirror where I've got all my daily stuff up on the screen while I'm getting ready for work.
Okay. Well, we've come to the end of another fantastic show. Thank you so much to our producers for your questions, and to our panelists. Thank you so much. And we are getting ready for the chat at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard, 1 p.m. EED time, and for the live viewing of WWDC. But for now, we're going to head into after hours. Oh, and one more thing.
Slightly different. We're going to... Not to get too confused with after hours. We are going to have a space right now between now and 10 where we're going to stay in. It was just too complicated to jump to after hours and then back to office hours and then into after hours. I know I just told everybody that I just realized there's no reason for me to do this. I told everybody that we're going to do it back into off. I'm thinking on the fly, which is always dangerous. I better not change it now. I guess the question, and someone can tell me in the panel chat, we could go to after hours. This is the first time we've ever done this, where we've stopped and then decided to stream again. And I was in this mode where like we had to be in that, but we could just go into after hours and then pump the show into after hours. Does that work for you, JJ? Like we just push the show into after hours rather than... That way we can launch up after hours and let everybody hang out, and then we'll now the panelists need to be in here because we're streaming. So the panelists need to be in here, but but I think that JJ approves of my plan. So anyway, so we're going to go ahead and go into never mind. Just ignore everything I just said. But note that in after hours, we can create a breakout room, JJ. So we'll create a breakout room. So there'll be a WWDC viewing of the program in it. Remember that it's a second ear experience. You'll still have to watch it somewhere. We don't want to break any TOSs. But we'll go into after hours. There'll be a breakout in after hours. That's where you can watch it. Or you can just watch it in Mukana, because Mukana will be back up with the live stream, or you can watch it on YouTube. So those are all the things that we're going to do.
And for us panelists, we just stay here and ignore everything else.
You can go into after hours, come back, but just come back in time to check everything. JJ would prefer you to stay. JJ's like, leave. Don't do that. No. So anyway, so JJ thinks we should stay. So anyway, so we'll stay here, or we'll come, or if you're a panelist, come back to here. But if you are but otherwise we'll push it through there.
Are we piping the program feed in here, Alex?
No, we're not. We're not. We're going to pipe it into the comms. So,
okay.
So you'll be able to hear it through your comms input, and not through that way we're not pushing the audio in, but it does keep us all in sync. So we'll, as the panelists, we'll see the video will be pumped into our view, and we'll hear it in our comms, but we will not push the audio back into the system. That way you can watch it on YouTube or whatever, and still ask questions and be part of it without listening. You can listen to us and control our volume compared to your program experience. It's been something we've been trying to do for like 4 years. Like we've been talking about for like 4 years. We should do this as a truly second ear experience. Today is the first test, so we'll see how it goes.
It's a great day for a test. And if you want to see what's happening tonight, we've got all these WWDC events happening. Go to officehours.global, and everyone else, we'll see you in after hours. Bye.
Great job for Liberty. Absolutely. We love Liberty as host.
Now I need to try this because I'm so jealous.
You got to get it.